Hello, everyone. It's great to see you. Really so exciting, and also very happy to find that I am getting to know a few people. It's not always fresh faces now, and so thank you for coming. Thank you for coming back. We're here to talk about birds a little bit, which is going to be fun, and want to share some of my peculiar perspectives on birds. So now, what is the story? So it goes back 17,000 years. People were out there thinking about birds, thinking about what their relationship was to nature generally as far back as the Lascaux caves in France. So we've got two birds pictured here. The best thing I've heard is that this upper figure is a shaman. So somehow they're relating birds to a successful hunt. And this is a very unhappy Pleistocene bison because those are its insides, underneath it, outside. So, and then here, and it's unclear what this bird on a pole actually is. It could be a staff of this shaman, or it could be a bird sitting on a pole having some significance. It's not, this has not been, to anything I've seen, have been able to explain this. But the point is, this is humankind's first known representation of birds. And our relationship, really, our documented relationship, starts here. Then we get going to the development of society. And the earliest civilization that really speaks to our lived experience now is ancient Egypt. And a lot of the archetypes of society start here. And this is Thoth, or Jehuti, meaning he who is like the ibis. He's the god of knowledge. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And its relationship with the sacred ibis is one that both honors Thoth and the ibis itself. And so they related this bird, which we often see in rubbish bins in Disney World, to knowledge and wisdom. And of course, they make great pets too. Now maybe they were feeding them their equivalent of potato chips, but the fact that they tamed very quickly was one of the features of all of the birds that were revered in ancient Egypt, because people could have a lot to do with them. They could see them. They actually kept them as house pets, as well as being in the temples to pray to Thoth. They would mummify them. So now Thoth's wife was Seshat. This is just a fun little aside. She's our goddess. She was the goddess of libraries. She invented writing. And look at this. She is actually Linda Hall's special goddess: accounting, architecture, astronomy, astrology, building, mathematics, and surveying. She should be giving this talk herself. Up on the top of her head, this is just a nice little aside too, is a lotus flower, which is, she's always represented with a 7-petaled lotus flower, which very unclear as to why, but, well, at least in everything I've read, people have a lot of theories, but certainly here she is with her pen, and she's probably doing our accounts for the year. So everything that many of you probably know of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. This is one of the pieces of glue that keeps their society together. Here is the god Anubis, the jackal-headed god, and here is the fellow next to him who's just passed on. Next to that is his heart, and his heart is being weighed against a feather. And if they weigh the same, then he gets to go into the afterlife. Not so lucky if it doesn't. So there's actually lots of birds in here. First of all, there is Thoth. There he is, God of knowledge. He co-presides over this process to make sure that it's all above board and everything's going well. Then there's this really interesting one. This is the Ba. The Ba is a bird with a human head, and we've seen all those before. But the Ba is a really good creature who is basically your personality. And when you pass on, the Ba takes your personality and goes and joins the Ka. So the literally is thought to fly around the tomb, find an exit hole, and go and bring your personality to join with your Ka, which is your essence. And so that kind of completes the cycle to allow you to move on to the afterlife. But also, we have Horus here up at the top. He is the god of kingship, and he is basically ruling over this entire process. So there are 3 ways that birds are honored in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. And certainly the kestrel or the falcon, those were very connected to human habitation. And I've already talked about the ibis. And in fact, a lot of these were, so millions of sacred ibis over the first 1,000 years, the first millennium BC, were mummified. And they would actually take the bird, which they had bred in the temple, they would kill it sacrificially, they would wrap it up, and they would put it in a little alcove for you, and that was it was a little bit like Lourdes later on, you know, that you could have this memento that would connect you to the god. But of course, they also ate birds, they hunted birds. There was still a utilitarian component to their relationship. And there's a cat. We're going to talk about cats later, but this fellow, or these people, are hunting alongside cats in the marshes along the Nile. So it's a very interesting relationship, but the one of reverence was very, very important. So now we're going to move to ancient Greece. And the big contrast is that there was such reverence in ancient Egypt for birds, and declining reverence as we go forward in history. So here is the Symphalian birds. This was the 6th task of Hercules. These were man-eating birds, and they were in a marsh, and he was tasked with trying to get rid of them. Any of you who have tried to walk into a marsh know how difficult that is. So Athena gave him some special equipment, and he actually never got rid of them. He just scared them away. Who knows where they went? That was not recorded. Now, those look like swans to me. I'm sorry, that does not look like a scary bird at all. So maybe if you don't like that, you'll prefer Disney's version. Here you go. This is from Hercules. That's probably a little bit more like what they were like, I'm just saying. But so all of a sudden you're getting these scary birds. Birds are not as nice as they used to be in Greek mythology. Sure, here's some nice quail a bit later. So in the geometric period, this earthenware pots from about 530 BC. But you also get pots like this, right? So contrast this to the Ba, which I showed you in ancient Egypt. Here are harpies, very, very similar looking. You have a bird with a female face. Divine punishment and retribution, not a nice animal to connect to. Or here the siren, and they're conflated with harpies here. I'm sorry, they're, conflated with harpies. These are, the sirens are also, so they're like the progenitors of mermaids. They started out as birds, they ended up as fish. That's not really very evolutionary correct, but it's okay. So Again, the important thing is that the attitudes towards birds are changing from something that it was revered to something that was less so. And at the same time, you've got Aristotle. And Aristotle is really the first scientific treatment of the world around him, thinking about using his observations to organize the world around him. So he's looking at observations, organizing things, and comes up with a very basic classification, which is not too different from what we have now. You've got creatures with blood and creatures with no blood, or as we know it now, hemolymph, or some other sort of non-red blood. Now, he did make some mistakes here. Octopus are over in their own group. Here, whales and dolphins are not part of mammals, but basically there's some relationship. Now, when he dealt with birds, it gets a little stranger. You have hook-taloned birds, which are basically raptors. You have terrestrial birds, so think of ostriches and chickens and turkeys. Web-footed birds and fissiped waterside birds, the egrets and herons and things. And so you get things like pigeons, which are in the terrestrial birds because they're gregarious, which is a very strange thing. It's based on both physical characteristics and behavior, which is not something we would do now. So it's an imperfect system, but what it does do is begin the process of classifying the world around us. And it would be another 2,000 years before a similarly robust treatment was made of the natural world. So you have all these myths at the same time as you have starting to be a really robust scientific look at the world of nature, and of course birds are part of that. So now we've got ancient Rome. I think ancient Rome is kind of interesting, but not as interesting as what came before or came afterwards, except for one thing, and that's this. Pliny the Elder called this bird a most exquisite flavor. Now, I tell you, I've never eaten any of my study animals, and I'm not going to eat this one because this is a flamingo. You can still get online. I'm going to say this is not a dead flamingo, it's a dead duck made in the style of an ancient Roman flamingo. Just to tell you, I wouldn't do that to you. But here is, in fact, a Roman mosaic with a flamingo, looking like it's ready to be chowed down on. So, yeah, I just thought that was a little odd, so I wanted to share it. So let's just advance quickly to the Middle Ages. Birds are hunted for food and feathers. Falconry is an aristocratic sport in the Middle Ages. But when we're talking about things like classification, because of course this is grounded in the science of birds, everything in the Middle Ages, of course, is grounded in Christianity. So here's the great chain of being. So that organizes every living thing and non-living thing based on its relationship to God. So I'm just going to make it a little, because this is an etching, I'm going to make it a little easier. There you go. There's God up there on the cloud. There's the hell with the fire, and there's this chain in the middle. And there are some aspects of physicality in it. Of course, it's mostly philosophical. But it is grounded in Aristotelian philosophy. It's championed by Thomas Aquinas and others. And the interesting thing, why I say there's a little sense of physicality in here, because birds, because they could fly, were closer to God than terrestrial animals. So let me explain how this works. So you've got physical features like rocks. So everything has a physical feature. They're way down there. Then you have biological features. So you're taking a rock and you add biological features and that becomes a tree or a plant. Then you add in instincts and that becomes an animal. So animals have physical features, biological features, then instincts. And then you take all of that and you add in specifically human figures, and you can see here, so here are instincts, here's people up here, specifically human figures, and then you get divine figures, and finally God, who has all of it. He has physical, biological, instincts, et cetera, divine features, which are the angels, and so he's got the whole lot. So that's the great chain of being. Birds have their place like everything else. Then you get the Renaissance, and there's a burgeoning of ideas about the natural world. Its thinking has become less constrained, and people's thinking about birds comes along for the ride. Now, I know Bill Ashworth is in the room, and this is his absolute area of expertise. So if you were unlucky enough to miss his last talk the other day, it's a shame, and you should see it online if it is online. I can't do the same justice, but I'll do my best. Here's Albrecht Dürer. This is the wing of a European roller. I'm assuming that this was drawn from something that he pulled off the bird, drawn from life. And here is a picture of by Bronzino of Giovanni de' Medici. So keeping birds, hunting birds, still an aristocratic tradition, but now people are, well, they've actually had zoos and menageries for a very long time. Queen Hatshepsut in ancient Egypt is credited with the first zoo, but still menageries were popular. Falconry still was going on. There was a cultural influence of birds in society, but people were also starting to think about the ethics of keeping birds, the ethics of our relationship to nature. But there was also still some nice mythology happening, which is a bit of fun. So here's our two portraits of Queen Elizabeth I. They were both painted in the 1540s by Nicholas Hilliard. And this on the left is the pelican portrait, and on the right is the phoenix portrait. And I'll just enlarge the reasons for them being called that are the big jewels that she's wearing on her bodice. The left is the pelican, and this is a Christian symbol, which is the baby pelicans being fed from the breast of the pelican mother. And in fact, the reason why they thought that is because when pelicans feed their babies, they have fish in their pouch, and the babies reach their head all the way inside the mother's pouch to grab the fish, so they didn't quite know what they were seeing. Here is the phoenix portrait, and here's a phoenix rising from the ashes. So this is showing Elizabeth's faith. This is showing her indomitable character. So birds are still used for symbolism as well as the practical hunting. There's still falconry for food at this time. So, but the point is our relationships are changing to birds. So here's William Shakespeare. I can't have a talk without William Shakespeare, just so you're prepared. So he's looking at birds as analogies for hope, for freedom, for death in some cases. And he was also, within his writings, an astute student of bird behavior. So here is from Henry VIII, part 1. There's a reference to cuckoo chicks being larger than their foster parents. So here, and being fed by us, you you used us so that on gentle hull the cuckoo's bird useth the sparrow, did oppress our nest, grew by our feeding to so great a bulk that even our love durst not come near your sight for fear of swallowing. So I'm always amazed when I see this phenomenon, this tiny little bird feeding this gigantic cuckoo, like just destroying itself to keep its foster baby fed. So this is, again, we're really starting to think more holistically about birds. Here's Ulysses Aldrovandi, and we have an Aldrovandi, a copy of Aldrovandi in the exhibition. He produced 3 volumes on birds as part of a 14-volume natural history. And the material was assembled both from what earlier authors said, and he included his own observations. He used the best artists he could from across Europe, and one of the contributions he made was that species groupings he used species groupings as opposed to alphabetical ones. And here is a picture of his amazing cabinet of curiosities, and you can see, I'm going to say, so I have a personal love of cormorants, as you'll see in the exhibition. I think that's a cormorant right there, but that's just me. But here is a small person showing around. He's pointing to things. All of this material, or much of it, still exists. And it's in the Museo di Palazzo Poggi in Bologna. And here's how it's displayed now. So all of this is the world's oldest still surviving natural history museum. So from the mid-16th century. So this is a fantastic thing, and I mentioned that it would be great fun to take a library trip somewhere, and I bet you this would be a great place. I'd certainly like to go. There's still a lot of what I'm sharing here now are little events in history, little kind of quirky tales that highlight some aspect of our relationship with nature or relationship with birds. And somebody who had a surprisingly close relationship to birds was King James I of England. So there had been trips to China and elsewhere in the Orient where people were using cormorants to fish, and you may have seen documentaries about this. The birds are trained. They will dive into the water, they'll bring back a big fish that they can't swallow themselves, and they will be given a small fish as a reward. Now these birds are imprinted on people, so they let the egg hatch, and the birds think that these people are part of a flock. Well, he heard about this, and he said, I'd like to do that myself. So in his hunting lodge of Tybalt, he hired a fellow named John Wood, who was the Royal Cormorant trainer. And over the course of decades, he got a flock to fish for him, who bring him fish back to his table. And he loved it so much that he even gave cormorants to, for instance, Rudolph II, Emperor Rudolph II, as a gift. So that guy was almost as passionate about cormorants as I am. Then we have Francis Bacon. And so Francis Bacon was really, in the modern day, a pivotal figure, because he took our thinking about cormorants, our thinking about nature and about science and what we can observe, and he applied empiricism to it. He's considered the modern champion, the inventor of modern empiricism. So he took some of Aristotle's observations, and he decided to go and test them himself. So he was doing experiments on many different things, including birds. So he took Aristotle's idea, Aristotle's theory, that birds are more highly colored because they spend more time in the sun. Now, of course, they knew nothing about evolution, they knew nothing about genetics. So he started painting birds different colors to look at their survival and a whole lot of other experimentation. It was obviously inconclusive because he was working with limited data, but he did start thinking about the nature of color and the quantity of body moisture in the specimens that he was dealing with. So there was a lot of progress, and certainly he was at the forefront of a change in thinking about how we do science. Then you get to the Enlightenment. Now, of course, remember that these are just little pinpoints in history of highlighting interesting moments in our relationship to birds. And this painting is a really interesting one. So I'm going to get rid of the title up there so you can see what's happening. This is an experiment on an air pump. It's a 1768 painting by Joseph Wright of Derby. What's happening in here, and this fellow would have been an itinerant science demonstrator, and he would come to noble houses and he would say, here's my air pump, my vacuum pump, and I'm going to take an animal and I'm going to put it in this glass bell jar. I'm going to use my amazing pump and I'm going to get rid of the oxygen in here, and we're going to watch your pet parakeet die in front of your children. So here, and this is what's happening. The children are very upset. But the interesting thing is there's a companion picture to this where it's actually more obvious that the bird survives, because he stops the experiment because the children are so upset. But you've got deep discussions happening. They're looking at it. Here he's actually, the father's saying, no, it's okay, we won't kill your bird. Now the interesting thing is, back in the 18th century in England, an Australian parakeet is not, or it's a lovebird actually, is going to be so valuable that you would not kill it anyway. But here he is, there was some discussion around whether the boy is lowering, see this, the door is open on this bird cage. He's actually lowering it down to get the bird out. So I felt quite relieved actually when I saw this, because I thought it was going to be some carnage, but it's not. But it's pretty interesting that these guys just traveled around getting anything. They got eels, they got squirrels, they got whatever, and they just started depriving them of oxygen so the animal would die, as a bit of a showpiece, but still pretty interesting. Well, then comes Carl Linnaeus. So really, he added a ton. All of a sudden, we're going from classifying it based on whatever we think and organizing this based on names we like to a binomial system. So Linnaeus's really important contribution was nomenclature and taxonomic organization. So it's a standardized system that we still use today, and many species that we classify still are named by Carl Linnaeus. So that's an important part. But his major contribution, and birds were part of this, was that he was facilitating scientific rigor and the ability from scientists in one country to communicate with science in another. So Latin became the lingua franca of science, or scientific nomenclature, and that's been very important still, and still is today. But around the same time too, you had people heading out into the field and starting to get birds. So this is Mark Catsby's work from Carolina, Florida, and the Bahama Islands. And this book is actually on display in our exhibition, and he was working principally from taxidermied specimens. And I have the real one up here. This is the yellow-billed cuckoo. Because you can see that as valuable as this work is, they were very stilted birds, right? Because he's working from dead animals. But documenting in a way, these are for people in England, documenting this new world, this new connection to natural history. And here's John Latham, roughly the same time, and you can see that, and he's building on Captain Cook's expedition data. Also very stilted, very, there's some behavior in here, but still, you'd be lucky if you didn't have a photograph to know what that was really. And then enter John James Audubon. And so he gets a space in the alcove of our exhibition, and his major contribution was that he drew birds from life. So it included their behaviors, it included their environment in a way that previous authors hadn't done. But before I get to that, was John James Audubon the lost Dauphin of France? Now, you might go, what? That's crazy. But this has been seriously suggested. So let's review the evidence to whether he was or not. They were both born in 1785, and Audubon lived in Paris at the time that, that the Dauphin, Louis Charles, was there and during the time of the French Revolution. Louis Charles did actually escape. So he made it out, unlike his whole family and lots of other people. And Audubon was adopted right about the exact same time that Louis Charles escaped. So people are going, hey, wait a minute, this is starting to line up a little bit. Now, Audubon himself never claimed to be the Dauphin, just to make that really clear. But there were questions about his parentage. He kept his whole parentage very quiet. Now, if you thought that you might be killed if you were the Dauphin, you might do the same thing. So there was this really serious historical investigation. Now, sadly, for all of us history buffs, it was not the case. He was born in Haiti, and he was the illegitimate son of a French sea captain, which is exactly why he kept his parentage quiet. But still a pretty cool story. But here we get back to the behavior. So here is a photo, may not be able to tell them apart. And this is a very realistic, and you can see how beautifully he captures the behavior. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons that we use the Carolina parakeet to be the emblem of our show is because of the behavior. You'll be able to see a long deceased specimen of Carolina parakeet in our exhibition, which is very rare. Please do go and have a look at that. But the painting that he did, the exuberance of the life of these birds, you feel that. The same thing, spoonbills. I chose spoonbill because they're one of the species that I study, and it just feels alive. He's about to catch something. His wings are in the air. He's about to give himself a little push to dive onto that snail or crab or whatever he's found. This is pretty beautiful and is something that makes Audubon really special in the history of our relationship with birds. Another person, another figure who shares the alcove with Audubon is Charles Darwin. So it's important to think, all right, so of course, the theory of evolution by natural selection, one of the most important theories of modern biological science ever to be developed. It's the fundamental foundation of our understanding of biology. Changed through differential survival and reproduction, and it challenged the prevailing view that species were fixed and immutable. So the Galapagos mockingbird which is, we have a specimen, we're very lucky to have a specimen from the Field Museum in here, was alongside, in fact, even before he was studying the Galapagos finches, Darwin was looking at the Galapagos mockingbird. So here's adaptive radiation, which is the example of the kind of evolution working on the Galapagos. So here is your progenitor, and from a single progenitor, you get many different types, which are adapted to different conditions on the island. Now, today on the Galapagos, one of the most important conditions is tourism. That is my photo. He was just about to steal my French fries on the waterfront, and there is a Galapagos mockingbird, very wonderful and incredibly tame. If you have not been to the Galapagos, everything they say about how tame those animals are is completely true. You just walk right up to everything and it just goes, hi, and that's it. But as we think about the Victorian era, the understanding of science, there is also a darker side of this story, which is the utilitarian side. So especially in the Edwardian era, these amazing hats, and we have a hat. It's not quite that spectacular, but we have a hat from 1910 in the exhibition. Here is a woman with egret hats, with this egret hat just slaughtering. This was a lampoon cartoon in the Edwardian period. Things are starting to get very grim for birds, like they are for many wildlife, as technology improves to allow us to kill things in a more wholesale fashion. I'm not going to focus on everything we've done for birds, done to birds. A lot of that's in the exhibition, but this whole fashion thing is kind of an interesting phenomenon, right? Millions and millions of birds were killed for ladies' fashion during the Edwardian period. In the first quarter of 1884, 7,000, just as in 3 months, 7,000 birds of paradise were shipped from carcasses, were shipped from Papua New Guinea to London. 7,000 birds. And now these are not numerous birds, right? We're talking about these glorious big feathered things. If you haven't seen David Attenborough's documentary on it, you really should. It's amazing. Birds, and so here, this is an egret. It's a kind of headpiece. Here, it's got diamonds and an emerald in it. And the egret actually is the French word for egret. So they would put the egret feathers, they'd be kind of feather holders and here is a snowy egret, all hunted to just a fraction, a hair's breadth from extinction in the early 20th century. And you can see that these chest feathers and these glorious back plumes, they were incredibly popular for fashion. And the worst part about it is that they would be killed during the time that they were most beautiful, which was their mating season. So, of course, I mean, it was just incredible. But then you think the passenger pigeon was the world's most numerous bird, like 1 billion individuals, all gone. So humans really do have a way of doing something right. Then in 1918, there was the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and of course, it took a while for everybody to get the idea, but you were not able to transport protected migratory birds, and so hunting was also illegal. So here is a haul from the 1930s of egrets for fashion, and thank goodness, and I'll talk to you about this in a minute. We've done such a good job in conserving wetlands in the United States that of all the bird types and all the habitat types that are declining, wetland birds are actually doing okay, which is an incredible story to what we can do if we choose to. So here's the hat. This is on display. Now I will say it took a long time to figure out what this bird was because we thought probably it was died. And I'll just thank Eric Ward for this. He put it on the bird. He asked Facebook bird group, which bird is this? And people were, making all sorts of strange suggestions, but one expert came up with Sady Egret, and actually that's right. We could see the little brown feathers underneath, and it all came right. So we now know exactly what it was. But it's wonderful to have a community out there of people. I mean, this is an African bird. We're not that familiar with it here. Wonderful to have a community of experts out there willing to help with something like identifying a hat from 1910. And here is this beautiful Sady Egret. And they have an incredible behavior. They are eating small fish in the water, and they will bring their feathers out like a cape, and they will shade the water underneath them. And so the fish come and they congregate under there to get away from predators, only to be picked off by the very predator that was doing it. So that's a bit fun. And here is, now I'm going to get a little bit depressing for a few minutes. This is a 2019 study showing that in the last 50 years, North America has lost 3 billion birds. Now, there are birds, of course, born every year. There's birds that die every year, but I'm talking about the standing stock. The overarching population of birds in North America has declined by 3 billion individuals. That's just, it's really even hard to wrap your head around how big that is as a number. Oh, wait a minute, I'm going to go back. Up at the top here, you can see this little blue band. That's wetlands. That's the only type of habitat where birds are increasing, that are doing okay. Everything else, coasts, arid lands, forests, Arctic tundra, generalists, boreal forest, grasslands are the worst hit. So species like the meadowlark, those are precipitously declining. We will live to see the extinction of some of these species. And so here is more of a look at the species. You can see down at the waterfowl, they're doing okay, they're in blue. All of these red things, American sparrows, huge, huge trouble. Wood warblers, blackbirds, all of these things, these birds we take for granted that are migrating through, that are in our gardens, they are in big, big, big trouble. And this is from Cornell University, just love an infographic. 160 million swallows and their relatives, these aerial insectivores. 2.5 billion migratory birds and 720 million grassland birds. These are and this is one of the reasons why I thought we needed to do this. We need to tell this story. Partly because we have such rich historic resources around it. The study that I showed you with those graphs, they've said, they've signaled a lot of reasons why this is happening, and one of the things that I want to kind of finish my talk with was this direct anthropogenic, so human-caused mortality. So this is my kitten. This is Buster. He's a very cute cat. He has never been outside in his entire life, so he really likes to kill toys. If he had been out, he would look like this. Cats are the #1 killer of birds, not only in the United States, but worldwide. Everything that I'm talking about pales by comparison to cats. Here's a bunch of cats. 2.4 billion birds every year are killed by cats in the United States alone. Now remember, I'm not talking about the standing stock, which is that 3 billion loss. I'm talking about birds that are born. In fact, Oh, this is one of my least favorite pictures. There's a cute little magpie, doesn't know what's going on, a little baby bird, and it doesn't have long to live. This is a really important thing, and if you could do only one thing to help birds in your environment, keep your cats inside, is a really important one. But also there's bird strike, so that is birds flying into your windows. 1 billion birds are killed by flying into windows every year. Now, we are giving you a wonderful gift tonight. It's a box, it was designed by Josh, who's just over there, and put together by our fantastic engagement team. There's lots in it, and I'll talk about something else that's in it in a minute. But one thing we're giving you is some decals, 4 little decals for your windows. Pick your worst window. These are very inexpensive, very easy to get. Amazon has them. And a little info card about what to do, because, and look, I'll tell you, these, when you go in there and you look at bird strike, there's a picture of one of these, this imprint of feather dust in a window. That's from our building. So it happens, and one of the things we're doing, excitingly, is working with the Missouri River Bird Observatory to retrofit our windows to make them bird safe. And in fact, there's lots of different ways to do it. You can have this sort of contact paper. If you don't like that look, you can get together with your kids and paint your window. Or you can have decals in more sort of fanciful shapes. Or if you really don't like any of this, and I get it, you can also do these decals that only birds can see. So they're ultraviolet technology. You can make them anything you want, and birds will know that there's glass there. But it's important to think about how to put this up, because birds are actually, they're not smart enough, but they're pretty smart, and they'll go, okay, there's an obstacle there, I'm just gonna fly in there, and bang, right? So they have to be appropriately placed. There's a QR code in the exhibition to learn more about how to protect birds. But the other thing is, and there are some very sophisticated window treatments that you can do too. And especially if you're building a house, think about having that house be bird safe from the get-go. And there's a lot more you can do when you're building the house than trying to retrofit it. Another big problem, you probably recognize this scene, and that's lights at night. Huge, huge, huge problem. It disorients the birds. They're attracted to lights. They collide into things. They deplete their energy flying around trying to figure out where they are because they're so disoriented. Predators can get them. It messes up their communication systems and their circadian rhythms. The darker you can make your environment, the better for birds. Now here's one example. In 2017, a building in Texas, which was lit up like this amazing, it's really actually pretty incredible looking. 1 week, 400 dead birds in over 25 species. 1 week killed 400 birds on this building. And they did the right thing, and they actually kept their lights off. It doesn't have to be all the time. This is specifically killing up here migratory warblers, these gorgeous birds that are traveling from South America to Canada, and they are just being destroyed by, during the day, it's mirrored buildings. At night, it's lit buildings. So we're already doing the right thing, which is wonderful with our lights at night. And we're going to join a consortium, if you like, of people supporting the idea of keeping it dark at night. So for instance, if you want to light your home for burglars, think about having a switch, a motion sensor switch, rather than having your lights on all at night. These are some very practical, simple things we can do to help birds. Another one is gardening. This is really, a lot has been said, and Kansas City is a wonderful place for gardens that support wildlife, and certainly there's a lot of fantastic groups who are doing this. So I'm just going to cover this a little bit because I like it. This is you probably saw this in high school. This is energy flow through a system, right? You start with the sun way over there, and it comes down and it feeds this meadow. The energy is coming up and is creating an entire ecosystem. And this is the important thing, thinking about, okay, we talk a lot about bees, but it just doesn't stop with bees. The whole idea around this is that birds are part of an ecosystem. And in order to support birds, we need to, and support the entire ecosystem, we have to think about every single part. There's a famous ecologist who likened taking these species out of a system like taking out rivets from a flying plane. You take out one rivet, probably no problem. Take out 2, take out 10, the plane still goes. But there's one rivet that if you take it out, it goes from flying to crashing. And we don't want to take out the last rivet because that would be really bad. So this is one of the reasons why pollinator gardens are so great, because they're supporting an entire ecosystem. It's not just the butterflies, it's not just the caterpillars or the worms, it's everything, and a very important part of that. And we're not doing all that great worldwide or across the United States either about pollinators. So all of these percentages are different kinds of bees and butterflies, pollinators that are in decline. 28% of bumblebees, 50% of leafcutter bees. This is all some things that we need to think about, that we can actually do things in our own gardens. And the exhibition has some resources, some ideas, but it's also not just, and actually it can look quite beautiful too. It's also habitat structure. So this is an important part when we're thinking about birds and pollinators and everything already as well. Layered vegetation, you've got rockery and lawns, having water all year round. We don't think about water all year round necessarily, but these are resources that even in winter are counted upon. Also having structure, canopy, mid-story and understory make a full complement of opportunities for organisms to live. Now, a lot of this, people are thinking sometimes people are thinking it's just so messy. Like, do we have to have all of this mess in our backyard to have a beautiful, to support wildlife? And the answer is no, you don't. So here, you can have very elegant gardens, very beautiful fountains, gorgeous foliage and fruiting things that really help wildlife without having to just make a jungle. And part of the reason for that is that edge habitat is very, very important to the ecology of organisms. So you can have a beautiful lawn and then have dense plantings elsewhere that are supporting wildlife just fine. This was just to remind me, if I hadn't told you before, about the fact that all of these wetlands are doing really well. And if we do the same thing for grassland birds, for garden birds, for urban and suburban birds, we can make as much difference as we have when we're conserving wetlands in urban, peri-urban, rural habitats. These are really important to birds, and we've already done it. We've done a great job. We can do the same thing with our parks and our gardens and our public spaces too. And thank you very much for tonight. I will be in the exhibition answering questions and showing you around. Thank you. What's that? Oh yeah, and yes, I'm very happy to answer questions. except for Bill Ashworth, definitely not him.
We have a few President Circle members who couldn't make it in person tonight and watching live stream. So I'll come around with the microphone if you have a question. Bill, where are you? Anybody? Yeah.
Eric, how about the predatory birds, that falcons, the hawks, the eagles? I was kind of surprised. I mean, the eagles are really a symbol of strength from the Roman Empire. Even
Yes,
our
that's
country.
right. Yes. Sorry, so,
The question is how are they doing population-wise?
oh, wow. Well, much of it depends on their, the specific species. So raptors generally are not doing too bad. The species that are doing better are those that can live amongst humans. So, for instance, osprey can do very, very well living on lakes that are stocked by fish. Of course, not stocked with fish. The cessation of use of DDT. I mean, that was the biggest problem for raptors. And for instance, the bald eagle almost perished because of it. But generally, they're doing well. Also, anything that can eat agricultural pests like mice, squirrels, those sorts of things, they're doing fairly well. Things that are not doing well are in birds that are obligate on marginal habitats like forests. And, those things are, and also in South America, it's not as good because, of course, there's a lot of logging and a lot of these forest obligate birds are not doing that well. So it depends. But generally, compared to other species, pretty good.
Yes, sir.
Eric, just curious, as wind power has developed more and more over recent years, one of the concerns that has been voiced has been the fact of bird kill with the wind turbines. Is that
Yes.
Is that fiction or is that fact?
No, that's real. That is real. Wind turbines can be very damaging to birds, especially migratory birds. So just like lighting up buildings, not using wind turbines either along migratory paths or during those periods where birds are migrating through is important. It's which of course is very difficult because the demand for energy is consistent. So there's a conflict there. But yes, absolutely, wind turbines are a problem.
Eric, we have a question in the back of the room here.
Hello,
By
back
the
of the room.
Taza.
Thank you. This is more, I guess, a comment or question.
Sure.
Being a more mature man and having grown up in Platte County back in the day, we grew up with Ducks Unlimited, which was, as you may know, the duck hunters had a lot of money that they wanted to put into keeping the ducks around.
Yeah.
And they put a lot of focus on wetlands.
Yes.
So I guess my thought is, how can we get that kind of almost fever, fervor, but I mean fever, of keeping our birds in folks that don't hunt and birds that aren't huntable? That is
a very good point. A lot of the reason why wetlands are doing well is because of duck hunting, which can be a little bit controversial in terms of whether you like to see ducks on your table or ducks swimming in the water, right? There's a difference there. But just like big game hunting in Africa and other examples, these species can, the habitat that they use can actually be, protecting them, even for hunting, can be really beneficial to a whole ecology, a whole ecosystem. And so how do we do that with other species? This is where I think things like home gardeners and landscape designers and those sorts of people who care about the beauty and the aesthetics of a blue jay taking an acorn or a red-winged blackbird along the side of a creek. I mean, those are the other example too, one of the major advocates for coastal cleanup and coastal protection are surfers, because they're users of that habitat or that environment, which is habitat for some species. And so getting those people who have the most knowledge, the most to gain, to advocate for birds in their own environment is, I think, one of the best avenues for making global change.
Eric, we have a question here in the middle of the room. This room setup is throwing me off here. I'm used to the middle aisle. Here you go.
Just throw yourself over.
What's your opinion about bird feeders and pesticides?
Right. Very, very different opinions of those two things. So I'll start with pesticides. They're not good, and let's just leave it at that. There are organic pesticides that you can use that work on the pest, deter the pest, but pesticides in a little bird's metabolism are fatal. So that's just bad. Bird feeders are a little bit more complex. There is conflicting data around the efficacy and value of bird feeders. So some bird species, like the tufted titmouse, have greatly expanded their range across the United States, and it's thought specifically because of bird feeders, which is great because the more birds, the better on a level. Other people say, well, you're not, well, there's two things. One, you're not, if you do it, enjoy it. I mean, if you enjoy it, do it, right? The birds aren't going to die if you don't, but if you want to bring them around your house, that's great. Another argument is that you're just feeding the squirrels. So you've got to, I recommend the Squirrel Buster. It's a very good one. I do feed birds. I love to do it. I love to see them around. But the one thing is, if you are going to do it, make sure that you are watching for diseased birds coming to your feeder. So there is avian dysentery, which is one of the biggest problems in birds. And if you see a sickly bird, you should take the feeder down, thoroughly clean it, leave it closed for a week or two, and make sure, and then you can put it out again. So it's just a thing to watch for if you're going to feed them.
I think my favorite part of the exhibition, I have two of them. In the West Gallery is the display of extinct bird specimens, the specimens on loan from the Field Museum of the ivory-billed woodpecker, Carolina parakeet, and passenger pigeon. In the East Gallery is a wall panel, and we actually have a bird specimen too of the brown-headed nuthatch, which was recently reintroduced in Missouri in 2020 and 2021. It's a great story. Again, that's in the East Gallery. Let me ask you a question. I think I know the answer to this. What's your favorite part of the exhibition, whether it's a book or specimen or?
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's kind of neck and neck, right? So I love our Aldrovandi book. I mean, it's just such an incredible, you're only getting to see one page out of it, which has an eagle, a picture of an eagle. And this is 1555, I believe.
I believe so.
Yes. That would be certainly my favorite book. Of course, I have to say, so just background, I have my PhD studying cormorants. We do have a cormorant specimen with that cool picture of King James I. And of course, that's got to be, it has to be my favorite. It has to be. I would feel so disloyal.
And the cormorant has its own case.
It does, it has its own case completely. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I thank you, Dr. Dorfman.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.